The wind tore across the frozen plains like sharp knives. Snow whipped against her skin, biting and stinging with every gust. She stumbled, her alien legs sinking into the thick, powdery snow. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the cold itself was pulling her down. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps, forming clouds of frost that disappeared almost instantly into the endless white around her. She had wandered too far from her ship, too far from warmth, and now the vast frozen land seemed endless and unforgiving. She paused, shivering uncontrollably, and tried to lift her head. The horizon was a blur of white, merging with the pale gray sky. Her sharp alien eyes, trained to detect life in every subtle movement, could see nothing. No shelter, no path, no sign of anyone who could help. Her heart pounded, a strange mix of fear and determination. I can survive this. I must survive this, she told herself. But the cold was stronger than her will. Memories began to haunt her. She remembered the soft warmth of her home planet, where skies glowed with a gentle light and the air smelled sweet with unfamiliar flowers. She remembered laughter, the kind that echoed through her childhood home, and the gentle touch of her family. Those memories now felt distant, like dreams slipping through her fingers. She longed for warmth, not just of the body, but of companionship, of care. The thought made her chest ache. Her fingers, delicate and long, were stiff and numb. She tried to brush snow from her face, but it felt like handling ice shards. Every movement was a battle, every breath a struggle. The cold was insidious. It was not just outside her body. It was inside, sinking deep into her bones, draining her strength. She stumbled again, her knees hitting the ground, and a fresh wave of panic washed over her. She knew deep inside that if she fell now, she might not rise again. A sound broke the monotony of the storm, a faint crunch of snow, steady and rhythmic. She froze, straining her ears. The sound came again, closer this time. Something alive, something moving toward her. Her alien instincts screamed to hide, to flee, but her body was too weak. She could only wait, trembling, hope flickering in the icy darkness of her mind. She peered into the white blur ahead and saw a figure. At first she thought it might be a mirage, a trick of her exhausted mind. But the figure moved steadily, carefully against the wind and snow. It was human, a creature from stories she had heard of, fragile yet stubborn, seemingly fragile against the storm, but moving with a determination she had never seen before. Her heart raced. She had never been so unsure whether to run or reach out. Her mind was torn. She had been trained to survive alone, to rely only on herself. Asking for help was foreign, almost shameful. But the human came closer and she felt something she could not explain, a strange, pulsing warmth. It was not just heat from a body, but a presence, a force, something that spoke of care, of safety, of life itself. Her body shivered violently, teeth chattering as she fell to her knees. The human reached her, a hand extended without hesitation, thick gloves shielding it from the frost. He knelt beside her, voice soft and steady, offering words she could not understand. Yet in the tone there was kindness. In the motion there was protection. She felt a strange pull toward him, instinctively leaning into the warmth he radiated. She had never experienced a human touch before. She had heard tales, stories from travelers who spoke of human courage, their empathy, their unexplainable drive to care for others. But now, faced with one herself, she realized that stories could never capture the truth. This touch was life, warmth, hope, a lifeline thrown across a sea of ice. She closed her eyes, trembling, letting the warmth seep into her body. The storm still raged, but for the first time in hours she felt a small spark of hope. Maybe she could survive. Maybe she was not alone. And as the wind howled outside, she realized that survival was no longer just a fight against the cold. It was a fight toward connection, toward trust, toward something deeply human that she had never known. She stayed on her knees for a moment, letting the strange warmth from the human's presence reach her frozen body. Her alien mind struggled to understand what she was feeling. This touch, so simple, so human, was unlike anything she had ever known. It was not just heat. It was safety, reassurance, life itself. She had faced storms before, harsh landscapes on distant planets, but nothing had ever pressed on her as this cold. And now, here was someone who offered help, not because of duty or obligation, but because it seemed natural to him. Slowly, she forced herself to stand. Her legs shook violently, the muscles stiff and uncooperative. The human adjusted his grip, holding her carefully, steadying her as she took a few unsteady steps. She wanted to refuse, to insist that she could continue alone, but her body betrayed her. Each step she took with him was easier than the last, each moment of contact seeping warmth into her frozen veins. As they moved, flashes of memory came unbidden. She remembered her home planet with its gentle skies and soft glowing light. She remembered her family, how their hands had felt, the gentle ways they touched each other, the comfort of shared warmth. She had never thought she would miss these simple things, but now they clawed at her heart. Her chest ached with longing, and she realized how deeply connection mattered, even for someone trained to survive in isolation. The snow was relentless. Each step forward was a battle. The wind whipped their faces, cutting through the layers of clothing, and the world around them became a white blur. She wanted to speak, to ask where they were going, to understand this human better, but words caught in her throat. Language was strange. It felt clumsy, inadequate. Instead, she watched him. She watched the determination in his eyes, the careful way he moved, the patience in every gesture. Every small detail screamed that he would not leave her behind. Her body began to weaken again. The cold had seeped deep into her bones, and even with his help, she felt numbness creeping into her arms and legs. The human must have sensed it because he moved more slowly, speaking in the same soft, incomprehensible words, repeating them like a mantra. Somehow the sound alone was comforting. She realized that humans carried something extraordinary, the ability to soothe, to encourage, without expecting anything in return. She remembered stories she had heard about humans, how they could be fragile, yet strong beyond measure, how they could endure pain and hardship, yet still reach out to help others. She had doubted these stories before, thinking them exaggerations, myths to make travelers feel safe. But now she understood. This human was living proof of everything she had been told. His courage was quiet, his strength subtle, and his warmth undeniable. The minutes stretched into hours. The world around them remained a blur of white, but she clung to him. With each step, she felt herself coming back to life. Her senses sharpened slowly, her muscles loosening as warmth returned to her body. She realized how weak she had been, how vulnerable, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel gratitude, not just for being alive, but for being cared for. She wanted to reach out, to touch him in return, but her hands were still too stiff, too alien in their awkwardness. Still she tried, moving one hand toward his arm, brushing it lightly. He smiled, a simple, genuine smile that made her heart flutter in ways she could not name. No words were needed. That small connection, human to alien, fragile yet meaningful, was more powerful than anything she had ever experienced. As the storm began to ebb slightly, she realized something profound. Survival was not just about fighting the elements. It was about connection, trust, and the courage to rely on others. She had spent her life believing that independence was strength, that reliance on others was weakness. But now she saw the truth. This human, with nothing but his warmth and his courage, had become her lifeline. And in that moment she understood that humans, so ordinary and yet so extraordinary, were capable of changing lives simply by being who they were. She took a shaky breath, feeling hope stir for the first time since the storm had begun. Maybe she could survive. Maybe she could learn from him. And maybe, just maybe, this small act of human kindness would change everything for her. The storm raged around them, relentless and unforgiving, but the human did not falter. He moved with steady purpose, his steps firm despite the blinding snow. Every now and then he glanced at her, checking if she could keep up. She tried to walk on her own stubbornly, but her legs were weak, trembling like brittle branches in the wind. She stumbled several times, almost falling into the snow, and each time he caught her, supporting her weight without hesitation. The alien had never felt such closeness before. Her instincts had always told her to rely on herself, to avoid weakness, to survive alone. But now, pressed against the warmth of the human's body, she felt something unfamiliar. Relief, trust, and a quiet hope that she could let go, even for a moment. The cold was still dangerous, still threatening to take her life. But the presence beside her made it feel possible to endure. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to tell him she was grateful. But the words got stuck in her throat. Her tongue felt heavy, her vocal cords frozen from the cold. Instead, she simply leaned into him when she needed support, allowing the human to guide her through the drifts of snow. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady, and it comforted her in a way she had never imagined. The landscape around them was a blur of white. Snow covered every trace of life, hiding the path back to shelter or safety. But the human pressed on, moving in a direction she could not see. His confidence gave her courage, though her alien mind was still filled with fear. What if we get lost? What if the cold is too strong? She thought. But every time she hesitated, his firm hand on her back reminded her that she did not have to face it alone. Her body ached, and frost-bitten fingers twitched painfully as she tried to move them. The human paused occasionally, bending down to check her, muttering words in a language she could not understand. But the tone, the rhythm, the gentleness spoke louder than any words could. She understood it clearly. You are not alone. I will not leave you. That simple assurance, carried through human voice and touch, was more powerful than any weapon, any shield, any technology she had known. At one point, she slipped on a patch of ice, her body sliding toward a hidden crevice. Panic surged through her. She had almost been pulled into the dark void beneath the snow. But before fear could overtake her completely, the human grabbed her, pulling her back with strength she could not have expected from someone so seemingly fragile. She clung to him, gasping, her body shaking with adrenaline and cold. In that moment, she realized that survival was not just a fight against the environment, it was also a fight against isolation. Alone, she had almost succumbed to despair. But now, with someone willing to bear the burden of her life with his own hands, she understood something extraordinary. Humans, though fragile and limited like any other creature, carried within them a power unlike any other. The power to care, to protect, to risk themselves for others without hesitation. They moved on, slower now, each step measured and careful. Her breathing came in shallow, rapid gasps, and the warmth from his body seeped into her frozen limbs. She felt tingling, a slow return of life into places she thought were lost to the cold. With each step, her confidence grew. Maybe she thought she could survive. Maybe she could even trust this human completely. Hours seemed to stretch, but finally, through the white haze, she saw a faint outline. Walls rising from the snow, a shape that promised safety and warmth. The human's grip tightened, a silent promise that they had almost reached salvation. She wanted to smile, to cry, to tell him how much she appreciated his courage. But tears froze before they could fall. Still, the gratitude she felt radiated from her, unspoken yet undeniable. And in that moment, as the storm began to relent slightly and the outline of shelter grew clearer, she realized something profound. She had survived the cold, not because of her own strength alone, but because of the human beside her. His simple act of reaching out, of touching her, of refusing to leave her in the storm had changed everything. She had thought survival depended on skill, endurance, and intelligence. But now she understood the truth. Sometimes, survival depended on something far greater: human courage, empathy, and the willingness to care. The shelter loomed closer, a dark shape against the endless white. But the journey was far from over. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her limbs, stiff from hours in the cold, trembled with every movement. Snow clung to her hair and clothes, melting into icy rivulets that ran down her back. She wanted to collapse, to give in to the freezing numbness that was creeping into her body. Yet the human beside her did not falter. He moved steadily, guiding her, steadying her when she faltered, his presence a constant shield against the storm. Her alien instincts screamed at her to stay independent, to refuse help, to survive on her own. But every time she tried to pull away, her body betrayed her. Her muscles were exhausted and the cold was too strong. Each step with him brought warmth and strength, a life-giving energy that spread slowly from her frozen fingers to her chest. She realized that sometimes survival meant accepting help, even if it felt foreign or uncomfortable. The wind howled around them, louder than any roar she had ever heard. Snow swirled like tiny knives, and the icy ground threatened to throw her off balance with every step. She stumbled again, nearly toppling, and this time she caught herself only because the human's hand was there instantly. He held her firmly, their bodies pressed together against the biting cold. She shivered violently, not only from the freezing wind, but from the shock of how deeply human touch could penetrate the body and the spirit. Her breathing was shallow and fast. She felt dizzy, the world tilting around her. Panic rose in her chest. She had almost thought she could endure the cold alone, but now she knew the truth. Without him, she might not survive another hour. And yet she hesitated, afraid of showing weakness, afraid of relying on another being. It was a strange alien feeling. Trust. The human spoke softly, words she could not understand, but the tone was comforting. He murmured again and again, steady and patient, guiding her steps and encouraging her. She realized that humans had a way of giving strength without demanding anything in return. Each word, each motion, each small gesture carried a message far more powerful than language. You are not alone. I will not let you die. She looked at him, at the lines of determination etched into his face, at the warmth in his eyes despite the freezing storm. Her heart ached with gratitude. She wanted to say something, anything, to express how much this meant, but her lips felt numb. Instead, she let herself lean against him, letting the warmth from his body seep into her own, letting the trust grow, letting herself be human in the sense she had never known before. Relying on someone, feeling safe, feeling seen. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time seemed meaningless in the blizzard. Each movement was a battle, but step by step they progressed. Occasionally she glanced toward the shelter, the dark silhouette that promised safety, and then back at him. She understood now that the journey was not just about distance, it was about connection. Without him, she would not have made it. The storm could have been merciless, but his steady presence turned it into something she could endure, even face. Finally, as the wind began to wane slightly, the dark outline of the shelter grew larger, clearer. Relief flooded her body. She wanted to smile, to cry, to reach out and hold on to him, but words failed her. She had never known that warmth, physical and emotional, could carry so much power. Her alien mind reeled with the realization humans were capable of something extraordinary. Strength was not just muscles or endurance. Courage was not just surviving. The human beside her had something deeper, a willingness to risk, to care, to act without expectation, simply because it was right. She stumbled once more near the shelter, and the human caught her effortlessly. His grip was firm, patient, unwavering. She let herself rest against him for a moment, taking in the sensation of being held, being protected. The cold still nipped at her, but she felt hope, real hope growing in her chest. For the first time in what felt like forever, she believed she might survive, not just physically, but with a sense of warmth and trust in her heart. And in that moment, as the storm's roar softened and the shadow of the shelter rose before them, she understood something profound. Survival was not only about skill or endurance. Survival could be about connection. It could be about trust. And sometimes survival came in the simple, extraordinary form of a human hand reaching out, a steady body holding another through the storm, a heart refusing to give up on someone else. The shelter door creaked as they entered, and warmth hit her like a wave. For the first time in hours, maybe even days, she felt heat that was not just from her own body. The human guided her inside carefully, helping her remove the snow-covered layers of clothing. She shivered violently, but the warmth from the small heater and the human beside her spread slowly through her body, reaching places the storm had frozen. She tried to speak, her voice hoarse and trembling. Thank you, she managed, though the words felt strange and inadequate. He smiled gently and nodded, saying something softly, his tone patient and kind. She didn't understand the language, but she understood the meaning perfectly. You are safe now. You are alive. That simple message was more powerful than anything she had ever experienced. The human moved with purpose, bringing blankets and placing them around her. He crouched near her, rubbing her hands and arms with care, helping to return warmth to frozen fingers. She felt a strange mix of embarrassment and relief. She was an alien, yet she let him help her, and each small gesture of care seemed to awaken something in her. The snow and storm were behind her now, but the warmth he gave was something she had never known existed, something far more lasting than any heat from a planet or sun. He offered her food and water. She hesitated, unsure if she should take it. Her body was starving, yet she feared dependency, feared that accepting help would make her weak. But the hunger was too strong, and with a small nod she took the food. Each bite was an act of trust, each sip an acceptance that she could rely on another being. And as she ate, she felt more alive than she had in days. The storm had taken nearly everything from her, but it could not take this, the simple, profound gift of human care. She began to study him. Every small gesture fascinated her, the way he moved, careful yet confident, the way he adjusted the blankets around her, the warmth in his eyes. She realized that humans were extraordinary, not just for their strength, but for their patience, their empathy, and the way they could make another being feel valued and protected. She had always thought survival depended on skill and intelligence, but now she understood a deeper truth: connection, trust. and kindness were equally powerful forces. Minutes passed and she started to feel her body thaw. The numbness slowly faded and her breathing returned to normal. For the first time since the storm had begun, she felt safe. She looked at the human, seeing not just a rescuer but someone who had carried her through fear and pain without complaint, without expectation. She wanted to reach out, to touch him in return, but her hands were still stiff and awkward. Still, she tried, letting her fingers brush his arm lightly. He smiled, the simple, honest smile that made her chest ache in a strange, unfamiliar way. She realized that this human courage and care were not about heroics or grand gestures. It was in small things: touch, patience, presence. These simple acts had changed her, had reminded her that life was not only about survival but also about connection and warmth. Hours seemed to pass in quiet companionship. She no longer felt fear or panic, only a deep growing gratitude. She had never known that a single being could make her feel this way, alive, safe, and understood. The storm had tested her, pushed her to the edge of her strength, but it was the human beside her who had saved more than her body. He had saved her spirit. She felt a strange impulse to speak, to share something of herself, something beyond words, but she paused, unsure how to bridge the gap between her alien mind and his human understanding. Still, the warmth between them was enough. No words were needed. Her alien heart understood the truth. Humans were capable of greatness not through power or technology, but through their willingness to care, to risk themselves, and to offer comfort when it was needed most. For the first time, she allowed herself to rest fully, leaning back against the warmth of the room and the presence of the human beside her. She closed her eyes, letting the sense of safety sink deep into her bones. She had survived the storm, but more importantly, she had discovered something she had never expected. Humanity, in its simplest, most profound form, could change everything. The storm had passed, but the alien still felt its memory in her bones. The ache of cold, the sharp sting of snow, the heavy weight of fear. She sat on the floor near the heater, wrapping the blankets tightly around her. The human moved around the small room, doing simple tasks, stacking firewood, checking the heater, offering her water and more food. Each movement, each gesture carried a quiet strength that fascinated her. She had survived countless dangers in her life, yet she had never encountered a being so small, so seemingly ordinary, who could make survival feel not just possible, but safe and meaningful. She watched him carefully, her alien mind analyzing every detail. His face was kind but also determined. His hands, though not large, moved with confidence, skill, and patience. She realized that humans, though fragile compared to many alien species, carried something deeper. Courage born of care, bravery born not from conquest but from love, empathy, and the instinct to protect others. She felt awe, a strange warmth spreading inside her chest that had nothing to do with the heater. For the first time, she understood the true meaning of human courage. It was not just strength or survival skill. It was the willingness to face danger for someone else, the choice to risk oneself for another being without expectation of reward. She had seen heroism before in stories and history, but it had always felt distant, almost unreal. Now she understood. This was real, tangible, and extraordinary. Humans could shine in darkness not because of power, but because of their hearts. She reached out slowly, letting her fingers brush his hand, the same way he had touched her in the storm. The warmth of his skin, the pulse of life beneath it, shocked her with its intensity. It was ordinary to him, but to her it was a revelation. A simple touch had the power to calm, to reassure, to heal. She understood then that humans were capable of profound connection through the smallest gestures, gestures that could save a life, or even a soul. The human noticed her movement and smiled softly. No words were exchanged. None were needed. In that moment she felt a bond forming, a silent understanding that transcended language, species, and experience. She wanted to speak, to express what she felt, but her voice felt fragile, inadequate. Still, the warmth between them spoke louder than any words could. She had survived the storm physically, but now she realized she had survived emotionally, spiritually, because of him. She reflected on her life before this moment, the places she had traveled, the dangers she had faced, the lessons she had learned. Yet none of that had prepared her for this truth. Humans were extraordinary in ways that could not be measured. Strength, intelligence, agility, they were all impressive. But compassion, courage, empathy, and the willingness to touch another being's life without expectation were what made humans remarkable. She felt a mixture of awe, gratitude, and something else she could not yet name, a deep stirring in her chest. Time passed quietly. She felt her body recovering, her mind slowly relaxing, but her thoughts kept returning to the human. She wanted to know more, to understand why he had acted as he did, why he had risked himself for a stranger. She realized that part of her fascination was fear of dependence, but another part was pure admiration. Humans were fragile, yes, but their fragility was deceptive. Inside, they carried light strong enough to guide others through darkness. She moved closer, sitting across from him, studying his eyes. They were simple eyes, brown and ordinary, yet they shone with something extraordinary: kindness, courage, and the quiet determination to help others. She felt a swell of emotion rise inside her, something like gratitude but deeper, more profound. She wanted to thank him, to tell him that his actions had changed her, that his courage and care had given her life and hope. But she still lacked the words. Instead, she reached out again, this time resting her hand lightly on his arm. He looked at her, understanding without speaking, and nodded. That simple acknowledgement was enough. She understood then that humanity was not defined by war or conquest, by strength or technology, but by the small, courageous acts of connection, the warmth offered in moments of despair, the heart willing to reach out even when the world seemed frozen and hopeless. And in that quiet room, warmed by a small heater in the presence of the human beside her, she realized something profound. She had survived the storm. Yes, but more importantly, she had discovered humanity. And in that discovery, she understood that humans, with their empathy, courage, and simple willingness to care, could change everything, not just for her, but for the entire universe. The storm had finally passed, leaving the world outside soft and quiet. Snow sparkled in the pale light of a rising sun, covering the frozen land in a blanket of white. Inside the small shelter, warmth filled every corner, a stark contrast to the cold that had nearly claimed her life. She sat wrapped in blankets, feeling the slow return of strength to her body. Her alien mind, exhausted yet alert, turned to the human who had saved her. He moved around the room, performing small tasks with quiet efficiency, stacking firewood, checking the heater, offering her another sip of water. She watched him closely, fascinated by his ease, his calm, and the gentle determination in every action. There was no boast, no show of strength, no need to prove anything. Yet everything he did spoke of courage and care, of a willingness to act without thought for himself. It was in these simple gestures that she found the extraordinary nature of humanity. Her thoughts drifted to the moments during the storm, the relentless wind, the biting cold, the fear that had gripped her heart. She remembered stumbling, almost succumbing, and then feeling the human's hand, his steady presence against the chaos. That touch had been life itself, a lifeline thrown across the frozen void. And now in the quiet warmth she realized that what had saved her was not only his strength but his heart. She moved closer to him, still careful, her alien fingers brushing his arm. He looked down at her, eyes soft and patient, and nodded. No words were needed. That small, silent connection carried more meaning than anything she could have spoken. She felt gratitude, awe, and a deep sense of wonder. Humans, she realized, were capable of transforming lives not by power, but by their willingness to care, to risk themselves, and to give warmth where it was needed most. For the first time she felt hope that went beyond mere survival. She thought about the journey ahead, the challenges that might come after the storm, and she understood something profound. She would not face them alone. There was a power in humanity that could not be measured by technology, by muscle, or by instinct alone. It was the power of empathy, of courage rooted in care, of the simple decision to touch another life in kindness. That power had changed her, and she knew it would stay with her forever. She took a deep breath and allowed herself to smile. It was small at first, tentative, but it grew as she felt the warmth of the human's presence. In that moment, she realized she was no longer just an alien in a strange world, struggling to survive. She was part of something larger, part of a connection that transcended species, culture, and language. She had felt fear, cold, and despair. Yet she had also felt life, warmth, and hope in ways she had never imagined. The human approached her and offered his hand. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then took it. His grip was firm yet gentle, a promise of safety and trust. She felt the pulse of life in his hand, and it resonated deep within her. She had been nearly lost to the cold, almost consumed by isolation and fear. But this single touch, this simple human act, had changed everything. She understood that life was not only about survival, it was about connection, empathy, and the courage to care. Outside, the storm had left a world washed clean, quiet, and still. Inside, something more powerful had blossomed. She had discovered humanity at its finest, in the smallest gestures that carried the greatest weight. And as she looked at the human who had saved her, she knew that she would carry this lesson with her always. She spoke finally, her voice soft but steady. I will never forget this," she said. He nodded, smiling, understanding exactly what she meant. She did not need to explain. The feeling was mutual. In that moment, she realized that humans were extraordinary, not because they conquered worlds, but because they reached out to save lives, to give warmth, to offer trust without question. The alien looked out the window at the bright, snow-covered plains. She felt alive, fully and completely, for the first time in what felt like forever, and she understood that her life had changed, not because the storm had ended, but because of the human touch that had carried her through it. She would survive, thrive, and move forward carrying the light of humanity with her. The cold could never take that away, and so, in a quiet room warmed by a small fire in the presence of a human who had risked everything for her, she learned the greatest truth she had ever known. Courage, empathy, and a simple touch could change everything.